I'm Zara and I studied geography here at Bangor University. I studied geohazards module this year and found it really interesting that there's been lots of overseas events this year. But when I heard that North Wales had a landslide this year on the Llyn Peninsula in April, I wanted to find out more by talking to my lecturer, Dr Lynda Yorke, who's interested in geohazards and taught that module this year. So what has caused the landslide to happen this year?
Wow, well, that's really interesting, Zara. So yeah, we studied a lot of things last year, but it's really nice to have one, on our doorstep, as it were. So actually, when we're thinking about the landslide that happened on the Llyn Peninsula, we've got to actually go back to the glacial history. And you might not think, you think geohazards, glacial history, but actually what happened, so back in the day during the last glacial period, we had advance of ice from the Irish Sea ice stream, and it kind of overrode Wales, depositing sediments on its way, kind of a mix of sort of clayey, sandy sediments. But then as it sort of retreated, it laid down sort of big outwash streams, and we've got lots of sands and gravel. So we've got this really interesting mix on the Llyn Peninsula of different types of sediments that were sort of deposited during glaciation, and that's sort of part of why we've got a problem there.
Oh, right. So are glacial sediments important then?
They are in this context because, like I said, they've got lots of these different sort of layers. So we've got some layers of clay, and as you know, clay is not a permeable material. It doesn't let water sort of free drain through it. But we've also got sands, and what you tend to find on the Llyn is you've got layers of clay and then layers of sand above it. And of course, if you get sort of free draining and non-draining areas, when the water flows through it, you often get erosion of that sort of sandy material, which kind of destabilizes the slope a little bit, or you get build-up of water on top of that sort of clay layer that's kind of sat perched there, that again sort of destabilizes the cliff.
Oh, right. So how and why did the sediments fail at Nefyn then?
Well, so there's a few different sort of ideas sort of circulating there. So partly it links back to this idea that, we've got these kind of different sediment layers, and you've got water that's sort of percolating, flowing through the sort of sediments. And like you say, if you've got sand and gravel that are free draining, they're letting the water sort of go through. Obviously, water's really good at picking up and moving sediments, and it kind of causes like little areas of erosion. And if you've got little areas that are kind of eroding and they're sort of sediments disappearing, you're kind of introducing sort of instability into your slope. You're getting maybe little mini failures. So you've kind of got this clay layer that's kind of sat there quite happy, not doing very much. You've got sand that's sort of being eroded every time you get a big rainfall event, and kind of you get this kind of unstable cliff face where sometimes it fills in with sediments that are sort of being eroded from above, and then you just get a failure that kind of occurs. So it's kind of it's a build up really in here. I mean, what's interesting about what happened at Nefyn this time, I've just talked about how it's all been wet and you get lots of water that's running through, but actually it was really dry before we had this. Yeah, I know, you think, hang on, she's just told me about it raining and water, but probably what happened with Nefyn sort of in this recent event is it's either related to the fact that previous sort of wet rainfall events and erosion of the cliff kind of introduced instability, but the cliff was kind of hanging on, nothing was really happening, and then something's just occurred subsequently that's kind of what we push it over a threshold, so it's kind of gone past the point of no return. So even though it was really dry, and you think, oh, hang on a minute, why is it failing? It's sometimes it's just this build up of instability, and then it failed. So yeah, I think we're still probably thinking about what caused this, but it's probably long term linked to the fact that you get these events that introduce sort of problems and instability in the cliff.
Have landslides happened here before?
Yes, they have. There's actually quite a long history of landslides happening on the Llyn Peninsula. tragically, in 2001, there was actually a fatality related to the last big sort of landslide event that happened in Nefyn, and actually that was they very clearly linked to a big rainfall event prior to that. But what we know from sort of exploring the cliff faces there is there's been lots of sort of smaller landslide events throughout the whole of the Holocene. So obviously the Holocene, sort of the last 11.7 thousand years, it's the current warm period that we're in, but we've had lots of these small sort of incidences that have been happening earlier on, and then of course you get failure sort of subsequently. So yeah, we do have a long history of landslides here.
Are they always caused by the same mechanism?
Well, there's a few different things actually going on in sort of Nefyn. So we've talked about the rainfall and that sort of, causing erosion of sediments. But of course, I did mention it's along the coast. And of course, one of the biggest sort of agents of coastal erosion, of course, is the sea. And again, you get that, if you've got sort of a sort of stormy sea, they're great at sort of undermining cliff sections, eating away. Again, if there's this whole section's kind of got this interesting mix of glacial sediments, and actually some of the bigger boulders and the sands and stuff, it's quite easy for the sea to pick those up and pluck them out. And of course, if it does that, it kind of undermines the cliff. So you get that kind of nibbling away of the under sediments. Then of course you get failure. So yeah, there's two sort of main mechanisms sort of on Nefyn. The sort of sea coastal erosion, and of course the sort of interference with the rainfall events and the sediments themselves.
What about climate change? Will that make landslides occur more?
Oof, that's a really good topical question, isn't it? Because we're all kind of concerned about sort of the change in climate. But yeah, if you think about the UK and the predictions for how we think climate change is going to affect the UK, then they're suggesting we're going to see more sort of storminess. So if you imagine bigger storms, more angry stormy seas, bigger waves, lots of coastal erosion potentially coming along. But of course also with storminess we're going to see bigger rainfall events. And of course we know that the rainfall events, if they're sort of water running through those cliffs that are already unstable, again the potential for having more landslides is going to be heightened. So yes, I definitely think we'll see an impact sort of in the future. And I suppose that's maybe the thing that you guys can think about, isn't it? How do you tackle some of these big challenges?
Yeah, brilliant. That's really interesting. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks, Zara.